March 27th, 1981. Johnny Carson was 7 minutes into his monologue when Fred De Cordova, his director, the man who never interrupted live broadcasts, walked onto the stage holding a white envelope, written across it in shaky child's handwriting, "Urgent for Johnny Carson." Johnny stopped mid-sentence. The audience went silent. And when Johnny opened that envelope and began reading the letter inside, a letter from an 8-year-old girl named Sarah Mitchell dying of leukemia, 20 million Americans watched the king of late night completely fall apart. What Sarah asked for in that letter wasn't a trip to Disneyland or a meeting with a movie star. She wanted to tell one joke on the Tonight Show so people would remember her name after she was gone. And Johnny Carson made sure America would never forget Sarah Mitchell. It was a Friday night, and the Tonight Show was running like a Swiss watch. Johnny was in the middle of his opening monologue, making jokes about President Reagan's economic policies. The studio audience of 300 was laughing at all the right moments. Ed McMahon was delivering his trademark guffaw. Doc Severinsen and the band were tight. Everything was perfect, scripted, controlled. Then, Fred De Cordova appeared at the edge of the stage. Fred never did that during taping. Never. He managed everything from the control booth, invisible, efficient, always behind the scenes. But there he was, walking across the stage during a live broadcast, holding a white envelope like it was made of glass. Johnny saw him immediately and stopped talking mid-joke. The audience sensed something was wrong and went quiet. Fred walked up to Johnny and leaned close, his voice low but picked up by the microphone. "Johnny, this just arrived at the studio gate. Security thought you should see it immediately." Johnny took the envelope. His eyes went to the return address, written in a child's unsteady handwriting. Sarah Mitchell, age 8, Children's Hospital, Los Angeles. Johnny looked at Fred, then at the audience, then at the cameras. For a moment, you could see him calculating. Should he wait? Should he read this privately? Then he made a choice that would change everything. "Ladies and gentlemen," Johnny said, his voice different now, softer, uncertain. "I apologize for the interruption, but something just arrived that I think might be important. Do you mind if I take a moment to read this?" The audience murmured their agreement, leaning forward in their seats. Johnny carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single piece of notebook paper filled with a child's handwriting. Some words neat, others shaky, clearly written with great effort. Johnny began reading silently, and as he read, something happened that America had never seen before. Johnny Carson's hands started trembling. His face changed, his eyes filled with tears. The studio audience watched, confused and concerned, as the man who could handle anything with perfect composure struggled to maintain control. Finally, Johnny looked up at the camera. "I need to read this out loud," he said, his voice already breaking. "This is from a little girl named Sarah Mitchell, and she wrote it from Children's Hospital." Before we continue with what Sarah wrote, words that would shatter Johnny Carson and touch 20 million hearts, if you're here because you remember when television could still surprise you, when real emotion mattered more than viral moments, subscribe to Johnny Carson Legacy Stories. We're uncovering the truths that made Johnny more than just a host. Hit that bell. Johnny took a breath and began reading Sarah's letter out loud. "Dear Mr. Carson, my name is Sarah and I am 8 years old. I have leukemia and the doctors say I don't have very much time left, maybe a few weeks. I watch your show every night with my mom and dad, even though it's way past my bedtime, because it makes us laugh and forget about the hospital for a little while. I wanted to write to you because you make so many people happy every night, and I wanted to say thank you before I have to go to heaven. My mom says heaven is nice, but I'm still a little scared because I've never been there before." Johnny's voice cracked. He paused, wiping his eyes, trying to continue. "I have one wish before I go. I want to make people laugh just like you do. I want to tell one joke on your show so that when I'm gone, people will remember that Sarah Mitchell made them smile at least once. I know you're very busy and probably get lots of letters, so I understand if you can't do this, but I wanted to ask anyway, because my dad always says you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Thank you for making my family happy during a really hard time. Your friend, Sarah Mitchell, P.S. I'm really good at knock-knock jokes." By the time Johnny finished reading, there wasn't a dry eye in the studio. The audience sat in stunned silence. Crew members were openly crying. Ed McMahon had tears streaming down his face. Camera operators were struggling to keep their equipment steady. Johnny carefully folded the letter, his hand still shaking. He looked directly into the camera, and when he spoke, his voice was raw with emotion. "Sarah," he said, "if you're watching right now with your mom and dad, I want you to know something. You don't have to wait to make people laugh. You already did. And you're absolutely going to be on this show." He turned to Fred. "Fred, can we get Children's Hospital on the phone right now?" Fred nodded and ran off stage. The show cut to an unplanned commercial break while the production team scrambled. Within 3 minutes, though it felt like an eternity, they'd reached Children's Hospital and connected with Sarah's room. When the show came back on air, Johnny was sitting at his desk holding a telephone, its cord, snaking off stage to where it had been hastily connected. "Sarah?" Johnny said into the phone, his voice gentle. "This is Johnny Carson. Can you hear me?" Through the television speakers, the audience and 20 million viewers at home could hear a small, weak voice respond. "Really? Is this really Mr. Carson?" "It's really me, sweetheart," Johnny said, smiling through his tears. "I just read your letter on my show, and I have a question for you." "Okay," Sarah's voice came through, nervous and excited at the same time. "Are you ready to tell America your best knock-knock joke right now?" There was a pause. Then Sarah's voice, amazed. "On TV? Right now? On live television?" "Right now," Johnny confirmed. 20 million people are waiting to hear Sarah Mitchell's joke. "Are you ready?" Another pause, then stronger now. "Okay, I'm ready." "All right, Sarah, go ahead." The studio went completely silent. "Knock, knock," Sarah said, her voice clear through the phone. "Who's there?" Johnny responded, his face showing both joy and heartbreak. "Interrupting cow." "Interrupting cow? What?" "Moo!" Sarah shouted, cutting Johnny off exactly as the joke required, then dissolving into giggles. Pure, innocent, childlike laughter that cut through every bit of sadness in that room. Johnny Carson laughed, really laughed, and so did the studio audience. It wasn't polite laughter, it wasn't sympathetic amusement, it was real laughter, because an 8-year-old girl had just told a joke with perfect timing and infectious joy. "That is a great joke," Johnny said, still laughing, wiping tears from his eyes. "Sarah, you just made 20 million people laugh. How does that feel?" "It feels really good," Sarah said, and you could hear the smile in her voice. "Really, really good. Thank you, Mr. Carson." "No, sweetheart," Johnny replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you." He paused, composing himself. "Now, Sarah, I want you to listen to something." Johnny signaled to the audience. They began applauding, not the usual enthusiastic Tonight Show applause, but something deeper, more reverent, more real. They stood up, all 300 of them, giving 8-year-old Sarah Mitchell a standing ovation that she could hear through the phone line. The applause lasted nearly a full minute. Sarah said nothing, but through the phone you could hear her crying, not sad tears, but overwhelmed, grateful tears. When the applause finally died down, Johnny spoke again. "Sarah, I want to make you a promise. Your joke is going to be remembered, but more than that, I want to do something to help other kids like you. Would that be okay?" "What do you want to do?" Sarah asked quietly. "I want to make sure that kids in the hospital have things that make them laugh and feel better," Johnny explained. "And I'm going to name the show program after you, the Sarah Mitchell Fund for Children's Hospital Entertainment. Every kid who's sick and scared should get to laugh and feel joy, just like you made us feel tonight." "That would be really cool," Sarah said, her voice growing tired now. "You rest now, okay?" Johnny said softly. "And Sarah, you did great. You're a natural performer." "Bye, Mr. Carson. Thank you for letting me be on your show." "Goodbye, Sarah. Thank you for being brave enough to write to me." The line went quiet. Johnny hung up the phone and sat at his desk for a long moment, composing himself. The studio audience remained completely silent, waiting. If you're feeling what just happened, the weight of a child's dying wish, the courage it took for Johnny to honor it on live television, you're exactly where we want you. That's what Johnny Carson Legacy Stories is about. The moments when entertainment stopped and humanity took over. Subscribe now, because these truths matter more than any punchline. Finally, Johnny looked up at the camera. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "I started tonight thinking we'd do our usual show, some jokes, some guests, some laughs, but sometimes life reminds us what's really important. He paused, choosing his words carefully. That little girl has maybe weeks left to live, and instead of being angry or bitter, she used her time to bring joy to other people. She wrote me a letter asking for one chance to make people laugh before she died. Johnny pulled out his handkerchief and wiped his eyes, not bothering to hide his emotion anymore. I've been doing this show for almost 20 years. I've interviewed presidents and movie stars and some of the most talented people in the world, but I don't think I've ever met anyone braver or more generous than Sarah Mitchell. The response was immediate and overwhelming. By the time the show ended, NBC's switchboard had received over 15,000 calls. People wanted to know how they could help Sarah and other children like her. Within 24 hours, donations to Children's Hospital Los Angeles exceeded $75,000. Within a week, that number had grown to over 500,000. People sent letters, toys, and gifts addressed to Sarah Mitchell, creating a mountain of support that required extra staff just to manage. But more than money or gifts, people sent something more valuable: love. Thousands of people wrote to Sarah telling her how brave she was, how her joke had made them laugh, how her courage had inspired them. Sarah Mitchell lived for 4 more weeks after her Tonight Show appearance. 4 weeks the doctor said she probably wouldn't get, but they weren't ordinary weeks. Johnny kept his promise. He visited Sarah twice at Children's Hospital, bringing jokes and stories and simply sitting with her and her parents. On his second visit, Sarah gave Johnny a drawing. She'd made a picture of the two of them on the Tonight Show stage with the words, "Thank you for making my dream come true," written at the bottom in crayon. Johnny kept that drawing in his office at NBC for the rest of his career. When he retired in 1992, he took it home to Malibu. It hung in his study until he died in 2005. Johnny also did something else, something he never told anyone while he was alive. He set up a trust fund for Sarah's parents to cover all medical expenses, funeral costs, and to ensure they'd never have financial worries again. The only condition: they couldn't tell anyone where the money came from. Sarah Mitchell died on April 22, 1981, 4 weeks after her Tonight Show appearance. Her funeral was attended by hundreds of people, many who'd never met her but had been touched by her courage and joy. After Sarah died, her mother sent Johnny a letter. He kept it in his desk drawer for the rest of his life. It was found there after he died in 2005. The letter was simple, written on lined notebook paper. "Dear Johnny, Sarah passed this morning peacefully. She was holding the drawing she made for you. Her last words were, 'Tell Mr. Carson I hope I made him laugh.' You gave my daughter 4 extra weeks of joy. You gave her dignity. You gave her a reason to fight a little longer. But most importantly, you saw her, not as a dying girl, not as a tragedy, but as Sarah, a little girl who loved jokes and wanted to make people smile. Thank you for seeing my daughter. Forever grateful, Karen Mitchell." True to his word, Johnny established the Sarah Mitchell Fund. It started with his own substantial donation and grew through contributions from viewers moved by Sarah's story. Over the following decades, the fund helped millions of sick children find moments of joy during their most difficult times, providing televisions, video games, books, art supplies, and visits from entertainers to children's hospitals nationwide. In 2006, a year after Johnny died, his estate donated Sarah's drawing to the Smithsonian Institution as part of a collection representing significant moments in television history. Alongside it was the original letter Sarah had sent to The Tonight Show. Museum curators noted that more visitors stopped to read Sarah's letter and see her drawing than almost any other exhibit in the television collection. Parents brought their children to see it, explaining that sometimes the smallest voices have the biggest impact. In a 1989 interview, Johnny was asked about the most memorable moment of his Tonight Show career. Without hesitation, he mentioned Sarah Mitchell. "I've interviewed presidents and movie stars and some of the most talented people in the world," Johnny said. "But an 8-year-old girl with a knock-knock joke taught me more about courage and generosity than all of them combined." He paused, emotion still visible even 8 years later. Sarah was dying. And instead of focusing on herself, she wanted to make other people laugh. That's grace. That's what it means to be truly brave. When asked if he had any regrets about that night, Johnny shook his head. My only regret is that I didn't get to know her longer. But I'm grateful I got to be part of her story, even if only for those few minutes. Today, when people talk about The Tonight Show's most important moments, Sarah Mitchell's letter is always mentioned. It represents a time when television stopped being just entertainment and became a bridge between a dying child's wish and 20 million hearts. The knock-knock joke Sarah told that night has been repeated millions of times since, always with the story of the brave 8-year-old girl who just wanted to make people laugh. And every time someone tells that joke and shares Sarah's story, she lives on, not as a sick child, but as a comedian who understood that laughter is one of the greatest gifts we can give each other. Johnny Carson stopped The Tonight Show that night, not because something went wrong, but because something incredibly right was happening. A child needed to be heard, and Johnny made sure the whole country was listening. Sarah Mitchell asked for one chance to make people laugh before she died. Johnny gave her 20 million, and in doing so, he reminded America that fame and success mean nothing if we don't use them to help others. On March 27, 1981, Johnny Carson read a letter on live television, and America watched him fall apart. But what looked like weakness was actually the strongest thing he ever did. He showed 20 million people that it's okay to cry, that children matter, that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply ask for what we need. Sarah Mitchell was 8 years old, weighed 42 pounds, and was dying of leukemia. But for 4 perfect weeks after that Tonight Show appearance, she wasn't a sick child. She was a comedian, and America loved her for it. If this story moved you, if Sarah's courage and Johnny's compassion touched something in you, subscribe to Johnny Carson Legacy Stories right now. Hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to remember that even the smallest voices can create the biggest impact. And drop a comment. Have you ever asked for something brave? Because Sarah Mitchell proved that sometimes asking is the hardest part. And when we're brave enough to ask, the world just might say yes. Johnny Carson said yes to an 8-year-old girl with a knock-knock joke, and 20 million Americans said yes right along with him. That's what heroes do. They say yes when it matters most.